Hi producers! When you look around on YouTube with the hope of discovering some new tips and tricks or simply upskilling your music game, you often come across some contradictory advices. And a lot of times these conflicts happen because some people explain things from mixing perspective and some people really try to explain the things from a music production perspectives. And the typical plugins like your EQ, compression, saturation, reverb, delay, etc. The way we use them in mixing may be very different from the way you need to use them in production. You might have heard this advice that you should not use EQ with an extreme high-pass filter or a low-cut filter, or an extreme low-pass filter. You shouldn't use, let's say for example, a 48 dB per octave. That kind of gives you a very sharp edge over there that might result into phasing, etc. Now let me tell you something. A lot of times you'd find out in a production session, especially if you have live recorded instruments, you would require to use this kind of drastic cuts. In mixing, yes, you might not, but in production you might. Let me give an example. Let us try to record this egg shaker, for example. That's enough. Now, if I check the EQ over here, I would find, let me just push this thing up a little bit so that you can see the lower volume sounds. There's a lot of information in this range. Do you think we really need this range? I will be absolutely brutal over here and I would cut it until here maybe. Now, okay, there might be a mistake if you're trying to cut it until this point. But again, that completely depends on the kind of song you're trying to work on, the kind of other stuffs that are going on in your song. Maybe it's a requirement for your song to really have such a thin sound for the shaker. If that's the case and you cut like this, it's definitely not going to be an erroneous move. But yeah, in general, what I'm seeing over here, if you hear it properly, if you cut until this point, you're getting rid of all the junk, yet you're not really messing up with the sound. So this would be a perfect example where you might use an EQ so drastically like this. Let me give another example with my keyboard here. Let's assume instead of directly recording this keyboard over to my DAW, I decided to record it with a microphone. Now the moment you're trying to record a big instrument like this with a microphone inside a room, the room acoustics would become a part of the sound that is getting recorded over there. Now you really didn't feel that with this egg shaker. Why? Because first of all, it didn't have too much of dynamics, neither did it have a lot of frequency range to be covered. But a piano or a keyboard on the other hand, if you see, it starts from here, a very low register to a very high register. We'll try to record this guy up over here and let me place this microphone onto this speaker, alright? Now, considering I have ample room treatment going over here, the piano recording is not really too bad, except obviously it is completely in mono because I recorded through a microphone. Anyways, coming to the point, now let us say I wanted to do a little bit of EQing over here, like I wanted to roll off a little bit of the lows. I can do that, maybe until here, and maybe cutting a little room noise at 200, and this is what we get as a clean piano sound. Now let's assume you wanted a brighter top end. Generally I would do that with the saturator first before introducing the EQ, but for now let's use the EQ. That makes it brighter over there. Let's assume you wanted a darker sound. I'm gonna switch off this EQ and open a new one. Even so much so, I could have wanted a sound like this. That could have been my sound. I might have had more instruments layered over here, maybe a guitar going on with it. I wanted the highs to come from the guitar. So it's completely on you how you want to design this. Now please understand, this kind of a drastic EQ movement cannot be done by a mixing engineer. So if you're watching a mixing tutorial where a person is telling you shouldn't cut more than 2 decibels, you shouldn't directly use a cut filter, instead of that go ahead and take your shelves and get the jobs done, that's definitely a good advice, but it might not be suitable for your need. Compressors. Let us say I wanted to use a compressor like this over here. A VCA compressor, alright? I'm modifying the EQ to change the tone over here. mid-centric sound, let's assume we want over here. If I wanted a much biting sound, I would have gone for a lower threshold over here, a little higher ratio, and a quicker attack time, maybe not that quick. And then make this up completely with my makeup gain. You can see it's a biting tone. If I wanted to make it a little bit smoother, but not take off the bite completely, I could have probably mixed it over here. Now just think about this. Would you see a mixing engineer do this? No, probably not. Probably yes, probably no. But that's what is the need of the hour. I wanted my piano to sound like this, and therefore I am using the compressor as a tool to design that sound, to bring out that sound out of the existing tone, whatever I've got. Now you could do the same thing with saturation. Generally you would apply that before your EQ and compression, but again that completely varies person to person, and it just depends on what is your workflow, how you are more comfortable, and how you want to shape the sound through the plugin chain that you're building up. I'm using Saturn 2 by FabFilter, and let's assume I'm gonna set up 2 bands over here. I wanted a mid-centric sound. So if you want a mid-centric sound, you would require a little saturation on the top end, obviously. Now you're getting a little dirty sound over here, right? That's what I was going for. And I took the help of all these plugins to achieve that for myself. Even I want to talk about reverbs. Generally it is told that you should use the Abbey Road reverb trick, which basically means put it on a send channel on a bus instead of directly in the inserts. But if you want, you may definitely go ahead and put it on an insert. There is no hard and fast rule. For example, I'm going to put let's say a vintage verb on this, just to give it a little bit of color, right? I'm going to take the mix knob completely down to 0. I do not want such a big decay, obviously. And apply a little high cut. You can see the difference. One more thing I'd like to talk about is delays. You might have seen in mixing tutorials, people talk about using a very feeble delay behind vocals, like as a slapback or something. However, you can really use delays for creating an interesting sound out of a basic patch. For example, there is a serum patch I've taken that sounds like this. Now I could use an EQ over here to make it a little less sharper. And further a delay to make it sound like this. And we might slap a compressor on top of it to make it sound even more amalgamated. And this gives you a huge power. You might also go ahead and change the tone of your delay and make it much darker. And if you bounce this sound into a new track, you would identify that the delay has been really baked in. You might also go ahead and take these delay portions and increase their gains a little bit. And there we have an interesting sound. It's production, not mixing. The sound that you have right now with yourself and the sound that you want to hear ultimately. The journey from point A to point B should be made possible by these plugins that you're using. However, when you complete a production session and take the thing further to mixing, there the decisions you make might be very different. Check out this video for a detailed explanation on how to use these same plugins in a mix session.